Close your eyes for just a moment. Maybe picture the huge web of agreements that shape our world. Every promise, every deal, like a star in this vast network. Here at the All Sorts podcast, we're kind of like your guides through this complex universe.
Yeah.
If you're excited to explore these structures with us, help us light up these connections, then show some love with a like on YouTube. Please share these deep dives with anyone else curious about how agreements work, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss what's next. We've got a whole archive of past explorations too, tons of insights waiting for you. And for more connection, find the All Sorts podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads. Your support really keeps this exploration going. So welcome to this deep dive made just for you, the learner, on the All Sorts podcast.
Welcome. Yeah, today we're really zeroing in on something fundamental. The core differences between unilateral and bilateral contracts. Think of it as learning to see the underlying code, almost, of agreements you encounter every day.
Exactly. We want to clear up any fog around these terms, give you a really solid, practical understanding. We'll be using insights from legal thinking, some specific Illinois points, and some really interesting court cases, too. It's your shortcut to really getting unilateral versus bilateral contracts.
Okay, so let's start with bilateral. What do we actually talk about there?
Okay, so a bilateral contract, at its simplest, is a promise for a promise. Two sides agreeing to do something for each other. Both parties are locked in, obligated right from the start. It's a classic example. Buying something, you promise to pay, they promise to send the goods. It's that two-way street.
A mutual commitment.
Exactly. And for it to be official, acceptance needs to happen. And importantly, it needs to be communicated back to the person who made the offer. This can be saying yes, signing something, or even just acting in a way that shows agreement, like shipping the order.
Right. So both sides clearly signal, okay, we're in this together.
Pretty much.
Okay, so if that's bilateral promise for promise, how does a unilateral contract differ? Well, unilateral is different. It's a promise in exchange for an act. Think about a lost dog poster with a reward. The owner promises money if someone performs the act of finding the dog. But, crucially, nobody has to look for the dog.
Right, there's no obligation on the searcher's part initially.
Exactly. The promise only becomes binding if and when someone actually does the thing requested. So the big difference, only one party, the offerer, is making a promise at the start. The other party isn't bound to do anything.
So it's like the promise is just hanging there, waiting for someone to complete the action to activate it.
That's a good way to put it. The obligation for the promiser only really kicks in once that act is done.
Whereas with bilateral, both are bound as soon as the promises are swapped.
Precisely. That legal tie forms instantly with exchange promises in bilateral. In unilateral, it solidifies only upon completion of the act. And until that performance starts, the person who made the offer can usually take it back.
Okay. That distinction is clear. Now, you mentioned implied in fact contracts, based on actions, not words. Where do they fit? Bilateral or unilateral?
Good question. Implied in fact contracts come from conduct, not explicit words. Like, you walk into your usual coffee shop, not for the usual, they start making it. No words exchanged, maybe, but your actions imply a promise to pay. Their actions imply a promise to provide the coffee.
Okay.
So even though it's based on actions, it's generally seen as bilateral because there's still that implied mutual exchange, your implied promise for their implied promise.
Got it. So even without words, if the actions point to a two-way street, it's bilateral. Makes sense. Let's dig into acceptance now. For unilateral, you said it's all about the performance.
Absolutely. Acceptance in a unilateral contract is the complete performance of the requested act, nothing less. Just saying you will do it or even getting ready to do it, that's usually not enough. The offerer wants the finished job.
You have to actually return the lost wallet, not just say you found it.
Okay. But what if someone does the act without knowing about the offer? Like, they find that lost cat, take it to the owner, then see the reward poster. That's a critical point. To legally accept a unilateral offer, the person performing the act generally needs to know about the offer and intend their action as acceptance. If you just happen to do the act for other reasons, completely unaware of the offer, well, legally, you haven't accepted that offer.
So no contract is formed in that case?
Generally, no. The performance wasn't done in response to the promise. So in your cat example, finding it out of kindness doesn't typically entitle you to a reward you found out about later. There has to be that connection.
Interesting. It's about intent and knowledge, not just the action itself. Okay, this brings up something tricky. Revocation. Can the person who made the unilateral offer just cancel it if someone has already started doing the work?
Yeah, that's historically been a bit of a thorny issue. The traditional view was, well, since the performer isn't bound to finish, the offerer shouldn't be bound until the act is finished. So, yes, they could revoke any time before completion.
That feels a bit rough, though, if someone's already put in effort.
It does, and the law has kind of evolved because of that potential unfairness. The more modern view, and the one generally followed now, is that once the offeree begins substantial performance, the offer becomes irrevocable for a reasonable time.
Substantial performance.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly? Just buying the paint for the reward job?
Usually not. Mere preparation isn't typically enough. It means you've actually started the main task, made real progress. Like, if the offer is to paint a fence for $100, just buying the paint probably isn't substantial performance. Starting to actually paint the fence likely would be.
Okay, so you have to be genuinely underway with the core activity.
Right. It protects the person who relied on the offer and started working. The exact point can sometimes be debated, but that's the principle.
Got it. Let's shift gears slightly to consideration. We touched on it, but what is it really, especially for unilateral contracts?
Consideration is basically the price of the promise. It's what makes an agreement legally binding rather than just a casual promise. Each side has to give something up or take on an obligation. It's the quid pro quo, this for that.
So in bilateral, it's the exchange of promises.
Yeah.
What's the consideration in unilateral?
In a unilateral contract, the act performed by the offeree is the consideration. The offerer's promise becomes enforceable because the offeree did the specific thing asked for. Their action is the value exchanged for the promise.
My act of returning the wallet is the consideration for the reward promise.
Exactly. And this act needs to be legally sufficient, something the law recognizes as having value, even if it's not huge monetary value. And it must be bargained for, done in exchange for the promise, not just coincidentally.
Does the value have to be equal? Like, does the effort have to match the reward?
Interestingly, no. Courts generally don't look into the adequacy of consideration. As long as some legally recognized value was exchanged as part of the bargain, that's usually enough, even if it seems like a bad deal for one side.
Fascinating. The law cares that there's an exchange, not necessarily if it's a fair one. Okay, let's look at those cases. Carlyle v. Carbolic Smoke Ball Co. That was famous, right?
Oh, absolutely. Classic 1893 case. The company advertised this smoke ball, claiming it prevented the flu. They offered £100 to anyone who used it as directed and still got sick. They even said they put money in the bank to show they were serious.
And someone took them up on it.
Mrs. Carlyle did, used it exactly as instructed, got the flu anyway. The company refused to pay, saying the ad was just, marketing puffery, not a real offer. But the court said, nope, this was a unilateral offer made to the whole world.
Wow.
And Mrs. Carl accepted by performing the condition using the ball as directed. Her getting sick after doing so was the consideration. It established that ads can be offers if they're specific and show intent, like depositing the money did.
So just using the product became the acceptance. Incredible.
Yeah.
What about Arrington v. Arrington and Woods?
That's 1952. A father bought a house, told his son and daughter-in-law, if you pay the mortgage installments, the house is yours when it's paid off. They started paying. Father died before it was fully paid. His widow then tried to kick them out.
Oh dear, what happened?
The court said the father's promise was a unilateral contract. The act was paying the mortgage. And because the couple had started performing, making those payments consistently, the father's promise became irrevocable. They couldn't be kicked out as long as they kept paying.
That really shows the substantial performance idea protecting the performers.
Exactly. It prevents the offer from pulling the rug out after someone's relied on the promise and started acting on it.
Okay. Then there's Williams v. Carradine. What's the story there?
1833. A reward was offered for info leading to a murderer's arrest. A woman gave the info knowing about the reward, but turns out her main reason wasn't the money, it was guilt, easing her conscience.
So the defense was she didn't do it for the reward.
Right. But the court said her motive didn't matter. She knew about the offer, she performed the requested act, giving the info, and that led to the arrest, so she got the reward. The key was performing the act while aware of the offer.
So your internal reason isn't the deciding factor as long as you meet the terms and know about the offer. Good to know. And Hamer v. Sidway. That sounds different.
Yeah, this one's about not doing something. An uncle promised his nephew $5,000 if the nephew refrained from drinking, smoking, swearing, and gambling until he turned 21. The nephew did it. But the uncle's estate later argued there was no consideration because, well, not doing those things was actually good for the nephew. He didn't give anything up. He benefited. Interesting argument. But the court disagreed. They said giving up something you have a legal right to do, like drinking or smoking back then, is a detriment, legally speaking. That forbearance, giving up his rights, was sufficient consideration for the uncle's promise. It brought in the idea of consideration.
Wow, these cases really clarify things. Okay, so unilateral contracts are useful, but what are the potential downsides or things to watch out for?
Well, one big one is just clarity. Because acceptance is tied to completing an act, there can be arguments about whether the act was actually completed correctly, according to the offer's terms. This really highlights why the offer needs to be super clear about what exactly needs to be done. Ambiguity is your enemy here.
Makes sense. Vague offer, vague acceptance, potential problems. What else?
Capacity is always important for any contract. Both parties need to be legally competent, understand the agreement. If someone lacks capacity, maybe due to being a minor or having a severe mental impairment, the contract might be voidable.
Right, like the child finding the lost pet example. Legally, their capacity to contract could be questioned, even if practically the reward would likely be paid.
Exactly. It's a foundational requirement.
And those defenses mentioned in the Illinois texts, things like duress, fraud, do they apply here too?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Those are general contract defenses that can invalidate either type of contract. Duress being forced, fraud being lied to, mutual mistake, both parties fundamentally wrong about something crucial, infancy of the minor's right to void, mental incapacity, undue influence. Also, the statute of frauds might require some contracts to be in writing, though many unilateral ones aren't complex enough to fall under it.
So just because offer and acceptance or offer and performance seem to happen doesn't mean a valid enforceable contract automatically exists if one of these defenses applies.
Precisely. And there are also defenses to breach of contract claims later on, like impossibility or failure of consideration or breach of good faith. But those kick in after a contract is formed.
It's a whole legal ecosystem. Okay, thinking about modern examples beyond rewards, where else do we see unilateral contracts?
They pop up quite a bit. Insurance policies are often cited. The insurer promises to pay if a certain event happens. You pay premiums, but you're not obligated to ever make a claim. Some real estate agreements, like open listings where any broker who brings a buyer gets the commission. Or option contracts, you pay for the right, but not the obligation to buy property later.
The common thread seems to be incentivizing a specific action without forcing the other party to act.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Now, how's technology changing things? Everything's online now.
It's definitely adding layers. You can make offers and accept them electronically, for sure, like an online contest. First person to click this link wins. That's arguably a unilateral offer. But timing gets tricky. When is an online act completed? When you click, when the server registers it. And revocation, if I email you canceling an offer, but you complete the online task before you read the email, did you accept? It raises complex questions.
Yeah, the instantaneous nature of online stuff clashes with traditional timing rules.
It does. And people are even debating what constitutes performance or consideration online. Could getting 1 million likes be seen as performance fulfilling some kind of vaguely offered promise? It's an evolving area.
Fascinating. Digital actions as contract performance. Okay, as we wrap up, let's just nail down that core difference one last time.
Simple version. Bilateral equals promise for promise. Both sides are bound from the start. Unilateral equals promise for an act. Only the promiser is bound initially, and the contract forms only when the act is completed.
Promise for promise versus promise for an act. Got it. And knowing that difference is really valuable.
Absolutely. It helps you understand what you're getting into, what your obligations are, what others' obligations are.
This has been super helpful. And a final thought for you, the learner. As our world gets more digital, with online tasks, gig work, platform interactions, are we seeing new kinds of unilateral contracts emerge? Is the very idea of performance changing right under our noses? Something to chew on.
It's definitely food for thought. And as we close, if this deep dive helped illuminate things for you, please do like, share, and subscribe to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube. Check out our archives for more and connect with us on X, Instagram, and Threads. We really appreciate you joining us.
Yes. Thank you for exploring with us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.